The morning started the same way it always did for Tasha Brown. Too early, too cold, and too quiet. The sound of rain tapping against the cracked window filled the small one-bedroom apartment she shared with her younger brother, Malik. The air smelled faintly of instant coffee and damp clothes. The heater hadn't worked properly for weeks, and the thin blanket she wrapped around herself didn't do much to keep her warm. She sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing her hands together before checking her phone. It was 5:42 a.m. Her shift at the diner started at 7, but the buses in her part of Atlanta never ran on time. If she missed the first one, she'd be late again, and she couldn't afford another warning from her manager. She reached for her worn-out sneakers, the soles patched with tape, and sighed. She had promised herself she'd buy new ones when her next paycheck came, but that money would probably go to rent. Everything always went to rent. In the next room, Malik stirred. He was only 15, still half asleep under his blanket. "Tasha," he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. "I'm up," she said softly. "You got school today. Don't forget to grab your lunch from the fridge." "Okay," he replied, turning over. Tasha smiled faintly. She didn't mind the exhaustion as long as he stayed in school. Their mother used to say, "You can be tired, but never give up." Her mother's voice still echoed in her mind. Sometimes, especially on mornings like this, the kind that started heavy and gray. By the time she locked the door behind her, the rain had turned into a steady drizzle. The streets were slick, reflecting the orange glow of streetlights. She pulled her thin coat tighter around her and hurried toward the bus stop. The wind whipped against her face, making her eyes water. She could already see the small crowd gathered under the cracked shelter, a mix of people she'd come to recognize over the months. There was the old man who always carried a radio, the nurse from the hospital downtown, and a young mother, with a stroller who always looked like she hadn't slept in days. Tasha nodded politely to them and stood near the edge of the shelter, trying to avoid the drops falling through the hole in the roof. The bus was late again. It always was. She checked her wallet. 2 crumpled dollar bills and a few coins. Barely enough for fare and a small coffee later. Her stomach growled quietly, reminding her she hadn't eaten since last night. When the bus finally appeared, squealing to a stop, everyone rushed forward. The doors opened with a hiss, and warm air spilled out. Tasha climbed on board, feeling a mix of relief and impatience. The driver, a heavy-set woman with tired eyes, gave a nod as Tasha scanned her card. She found a seat near the back, next to the window. The glass was fogged, but she could see the outlines of buildings sliding by. At the next stop, a man stepped onto the bus. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, dressed in a gray hoodie and jeans. Nothing fancy. He patted his pockets with a frown, then checked them again. People behind him started to shuffle and sigh. "Come on, man," someone muttered. "I'm sorry," the man said quietly, his voice calm but embarrassed. "I must have left my wallet at home. I just need to get downtown." The driver crossed her arms. "No fare, no ride. You know the rules." Tasha watched as he searched one last time, pulling out a few coins that weren't enough. He looked down at his shoes, clearly uncomfortable. Something about the way he handled the moment, calm, not defensive, made her pause. Without thinking twice, Tasha stood up. "I got it," she said, stepping forward. The driver looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "You sure?" Tasha nodded. "Yeah, it's fine." She slid her card again and smiled at the man. "Don't worry about it." He blinked, surprised. "You don't have to do that," he said softly. "It's just a bus fare," she replied with a shrug. "We all forget things sometimes." The driver grumbled but waved him through. The man thanked her again before sitting across the aisle. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The bus rattled down the wet street, wipers squeaking rhythmically. Finally, the man leaned forward slightly. "That was really kind of you," he said. "Not everyone would have done that." Tasha smiled faintly. "It's just $2. No big deal." "Still," he said, "you didn't have to. What's your name?" "Tasha." He nodded. "I'm David." They shook hands briefly. His handshake was firm but warm. There was something calm about his demeanor, like someone who'd seen a lot but didn't carry it as a burden. "You headed to work?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "Double shift today, then classes in the evening." He raised his eyebrows. "That sounds like a lot." "It is," she admitted, smiling a little. "But I'm trying to get my degree in business management. Gotta start somewhere." "That's impressive," he said genuinely. "You must be exhausted." Tasha laughed softly. "All the time." She looked out the window for a moment, then added, "But I keep reminding myself why I'm doing it. I want to start something one day, like a program to help kids from low-income families. Give them a shot at something better." David watched her closely, his expression thoughtful. "That's a good dream," he said. "Not many people think like that." Tasha shrugged. "My mom used to tell me, if you can make life easier for someone else, even for a second, then you're doing something right. I try to live by that." The bus jolted to a stop and an elderly woman climbed aboard, shuffling carefully. Tasha immediately stood to offer her seat. The woman smiled gratefully, and Tasha moved to hold on to a nearby pole. David smiled slightly. "You just keep proving your mom right, don't you?" Tasha laughed. "Maybe." They fell into comfortable silence. The city rolled past in shades of gray and brown. David occasionally glanced at her, as if trying to place something about her, maybe the way she spoke, maybe the calm conviction in her voice despite everything she was clearly carrying. When her stop came, Tasha pressed the button and gathered her things. She looked over at David. "Well, this is me." He nodded. "Thank you again, Tasha. I mean it." She smiled. "No problem. Just pay it forward." With that, she stepped off the bus into the light drizzle. The air smelled of wet pavement and exhaust fumes. She tightened her coat around her and started walking toward the diner. Behind her, David watched through the window as the bus pulled away. There was something about her, something honest and grounded, that lingered in his mind long after she disappeared from view. Tasha reached the diner a few minutes later. The familiar neon sign flickered weakly above the entrance. She clocked in, tied her apron, and started wiping down tables. The smell of frying bacon and burnt coffee filled the air. "Morning, Tasha." Her manager called from behind the counter. "You're early today." She smiled faintly. Bus was on time for once. "Miracle," he said with a chuckle. As the morning rush began, she slipped into her routine, taking orders, refilling cups, offering polite smiles to people who barely noticed her. It was tiring work, but she did it well. Still, her mind drifted back to the man on the bus. Something about that brief encounter stuck with her, not because of what she'd done, but because of how sincerely he'd thanked her. People thanked her all the time out of habit. His gratitude had felt different, real. By noon, she barely had a second to breathe. When she finally got her 15-minute break, she sat outside on the back step, drinking water from a paper cup. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy and gray. She watched cars roll by, thinking about the future she wanted so badly. The degree, the nonprofit, a stable home for Malik. Maybe one day, she thought, things would change. For now, she just had to keep moving. Later that evening, after her shift ended, Tasha headed straight to her evening class at the community college. Her feet ached and her back was sore, but she refused to let herself skip. She sat in the back row taking careful notes as the professor lectured about business structures. When class ended, she checked her phone, a few missed calls from her brother, a reminder about an unpaid bill, and one message from her manager asking if she could take an extra shift tomorrow. She sighed and texted back, "Sure, I'll be there." Outside, the city lights flickered like tiny stars against the damp night. She walked toward the bus stop again, the same one where her day had started. The benches were wet, but she didn't mind. She sat, pulled her coat tighter, and looked up at the cloudy sky. Somewhere, across town, David was sitting in his apartment, thinking about her, about the young woman who had paid his fare without hesitation. He'd met thousands of people in his life, in business meetings and boardrooms. but none had made him stop and think the way she had. He didn't know her story. Not yet. But he knew one thing for certain. That small act of kindness had reminded him of something he'd almost forgotten. The power of simple humanity. And though neither of them realized it yet, that brief moment, on a rainy bus ride, had already begun to change both of their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The next few days passed in a blur for Tasha. Between her morning shifts at the diner and her evening classes, life moved fast and heavy. The weather had turned colder, and the wind cut through her thin jacket like paper. She didn't complain, though. She had grown used to pushing through things most people would give up on. Every day felt the same, but deep down, something about that morning on the bus still lingered in her thoughts. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the man's kind eyes or the way he had looked genuinely thankful instead of embarrassed. Or maybe it was because, for a brief moment, she'd been reminded that kindness still meant something. She didn't expect to ever see him again. People came and went. That's just how life worked in the city. You crossed paths, shared a small moment, and then went back to your own world. But sometimes, life had a different plan. It was a Thursday afternoon, 3 days after the rainy morning. The diner was half full with the smell of coffee and fried food hanging in the air. Tasha was moving from table to table, balancing plates on one arm, offering polite smiles even when her feet ached. As she approached one of the booths near the window, she noticed a man sitting there looking over a newspaper. She almost didn't recognize him at first. He was dressed differently this time. A crisp shirt, a dark coat, clean shoes that looked expensive. It was him, the same man from the bus. Tasha froze for half a second before smiling, not sure if he'd remember her. She walked up to the table with her notepad in hand. "Hi there," she said. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" The man looked up and his face lit up in surprise. "Tasha, right?" She blinked, caught off guard. "You remember?" "Of course," he said, smiling warmly. "You helped me out the other morning. I don't forget people like that." Her cheeks warmed slightly. "Oh yeah, that was you. Glad you made it where you needed to go." "I did," he said. "And I've been hoping I'd run into you again." Tasha laughed lightly. "Well, you found me. I work here most mornings. Guess the universe made it easy for you." "Seems like it did." There was a pause, comfortable and calm. He ordered a coffee and she brought it over, still unsure how to feel. It wasn't often that people who crossed her path came back around. When she set the cup in front of him, he said, "You were on your way to class that morning, right?" "Yeah," she said. "I've got night classes a few days a week. Trying to finish my degree in business management. It's slow, but I'll get there." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's impressive. You must be working hard," she smiled faintly. "You could say that. I'm trying to make something better for me and my brother." He tilted his head slightly. "Your brother?" "Yeah, Malik. He's in high school." "Smart kid. I want him to have chances I never did." He listened quietly, his eyes focused and kind. There was something genuine about his attention. Not the polite interest people sometimes faked, but real listening. "I like that," he said finally. "You've got a big heart, Tasha," she chuckled softly. "I don't know about that. Just doing what I can." He smiled and said, "You know, most people wouldn't have done what you did that day. I was short on cash and you didn't even hesitate." "Why?" Tasha shrugged, looking down for a moment. "Honestly, I don't really know. I guess I've been in spots like that before. When you need just a little help and no one's there. I've learned that sometimes it takes just one small thing to make a bad day a little easier." He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful again. "That's a good way to see the world." After a pause, he said, "Can I ask you something else?" "Sure. What made you want to study business management?" Tasha smiled, a little shy but proud. "I want to start a nonprofit one day. Something for kids who don't have much. Maybe after-school programs, mentoring, scholarships. I don't know all the details yet, but I know I want to do something that helps." He nodded with genuine admiration. "That's beautiful. The world needs more people like you." She blushed a little at the compliment. "Thanks. Right now, though, I just need to get through this semester." He laughed softly, then finished his coffee. "Well, I'll let you get back to work before your boss comes looking for you. But it was good seeing you again." "You too," she said, smiling. He reached into his coat pocket and left a generous tip on the table. For the coffee and the bus fare. Before she could say anything, he was already walking toward the door. When she picked up the tip, her eyes widened. "It was $50. 50?" she whispered to herself, stunned. She glanced toward the door, but he was already gone. That night, as she rode the bus home, she kept replaying the moment in her head. $50 was a lot to her. It could cover groceries for a week or help with a bill. But more than that, it felt like he'd seen her, really seen her, in a world where most people didn't. She tucked the money into her wallet and smiled to herself. Maybe that was the universe saying thank you. Over the next few days, she went back to her routine, but something inside her felt lighter. She didn't know why, but she felt as though something was shifting, like life was quietly preparing her for something bigger. A week later, something unexpected happened. Tasha was wiping down tables after the lunch rush when her manager called out, "Tasha, phone for you."
Said it's from the college.
She frowned, confused. "From the college?" "Yeah," he said. "Said it's important." She quickly walked to the counter and picked up the receiver. "Hello, this is Tasha." "Hi, Ms. Brown," said a friendly voice on the other end. "This is Maria from the administrative office. We've received a request from a representative of Harris Industries who would like to schedule a meeting with you." Tasha blinked, unsure if she'd heard that right. "Harris Industries? I think you might have the wrong person." "No, ma'am," the woman said kindly. "They mentioned you by name. Said it's about an opportunity." Tasha's heart skipped a beat. "An opportunity for what?" "They didn't say much," the woman replied. "Just that it's a professional meeting and they'd like to discuss something related to your studies. They've scheduled it for tomorrow afternoon at our campus office if that works for you." Yes, that's fine," Tasha said quickly. "Perfect. We'll see you then." When the call ended, she stood there for a moment, stunned. Harris Industries was one of the biggest companies in the city. Their name was everywhere. Billboards, community projects, scholarships, even the building where her college held job fairs. Why would they want to meet her? Her manager noticed her expression. "Good news? I think so," she said, still dazed. That night she could barely sleep. Her mind spun with questions. Maybe it was a scholarship opportunity. Maybe someone had recommended her. Maybe it was a mistake. By morning, she had ironed her only decent blouse and borrowed a blazer from one of her classmates. She took the early bus to campus, clutching her worn-out folder like it was a lifeline. When she arrived at the administrative office, she was directed to a conference room. The sign on the door read, "Harris Industries Foundation, Community Outreach Program." She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was bright, with large windows overlooking the city. A few people were seated at the table, but one of them immediately stood when he saw her. It was him, David. Tasha froze, eyes wide. "You?" she said softly, completely thrown off. He smiled warmly. "Hey, Tasha, good to see you again." She blinked, trying to make sense of it. "Wait, what's going on? What are you doing here?" He extended his hand. "I think I owe you a proper introduction. I'm David Harris, CEO of Harris Industries." Her jaw almost dropped. She looked from him to the sign on the wall, then back at him. You're the CEO?" He nodded gently. "I am. And I asked your college if they could help me reach you. I hope that's okay?" Yeah, it's just, I wasn't expecting this," she said, still stunned. "I can imagine," he said with a small laugh. "The truth is that morning on the bus stayed with me. You didn't know who I was, and you still helped me without hesitation. That moment made me realize something I'd been forgetting. How small acts of kindness can mean everything." Tasha felt her chest tighten, unsure what to say. "It was just a bus fare." He shook his head. "No, it was more than that. It was humanity. And I'd like to do something in return, not as payment, but as a chance to help you the way you helped me." Tasha looked at him, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" David smiled. "I want to offer you a scholarship through our foundation, full coverage for your tuition, books, and supplies. And when you're ready, I'd like to bring you on as an intern with our community outreach team." For a long moment, Tasha couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Are you serious?" she finally whispered. "Completely," he said. "You've got the drive and the heart we look for. And I believe people like you can make real change." Her eyes filled with tears. She tried hard to blink away. "I don't even know what to say." "Just say yes," he said kindly. "And keep doing what you're already doing, making the world better in small, honest ways." Tasha nodded slowly, still overwhelmed. Yes, she said, voice shaking. Yes, I'll do it, David smiled. Good, then we'll start making arrangements right away. As they talked about the details, Tasha felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope that didn't hurt. When she finally left the office, the city outside looked brighter. The air felt different, lighter somehow. She stood on the sidewalk, the sound of traffic humming around her, and whispered a quiet thank you to the sky. For once, the universe had given something back, and deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The next few weeks felt like a dream for Tasha. Some mornings she woke up wondering if it had really happened. If the man from the bus was truly the CEO of a huge company. If she had really been offered a scholarship and an internship. Sometimes she'd look at the official letter from Harris Industries, neatly folded inside her notebook, just to remind herself it was all real. Her classmates noticed the change in her. She smiled more. Her shoulders didn't carry the same invisible weight they used to. Even Malik could see the difference. What happened to you? He asked one evening, watching her make dinner. You've been grinning like you just won the lottery. Tasha laughed, stirring the pot of noodles. Maybe I did. Just not the money kind. He frowned in confusion. What does that mean? It means something good happened, she said with a small smile. And for once, I don't feel like everything's falling apart. She didn't tell him the full story right away. She wanted to be sure things worked out before getting his hopes up. But the light in her eyes told him enough. His sister, the one who had always carried their world on her back, was finally catching a break. Her first day at Harris Industries came faster than she expected. She stood in front of the tall glass building downtown, clutching a small purse and a folder. The company's logo gleamed above the entrance, and people in suits moved in and out, looking confident and busy. Tasha took a deep breath and stepped inside. The lobby was bright and modern, filled with the quiet hum of conversation and the faint smell of fresh coffee. A receptionist greeted her with a friendly smile. You must be Tasha Brown. Welcome to Harris Industries. Mr. Harris is expecting you. Tasha nodded nervously. Thank you. She was led through long hallways lined with framed photos of charity events, community programs, and awards. The company clearly took pride in giving back, something that made her feel even more certain she was in the right place. When the door to David's office opened, she saw him standing near the window, looking out over the city. He turned and smiled as she entered. There's our new intern, he said warmly. You made it, she smiled shyly. I did. Still can't believe it, honestly. Well, believe it, he said with a grin. You earned it. He gestured for her to sit. The office was large, but not overwhelming. It felt more personal than she expected. Family photos, small plants, even a worn-out coffee mug on the desk. It wasn't what she imagined for a CEO. How are you feeling? He asked. Nervous, she admitted with a laugh. Excited too. That's normal. First days always feel like that, he said kindly. You'll be working with our community outreach team. They handle programs we fund for schools, youth centers, and small nonprofits. It's meaningful work. I think you'll like it. I will, she said quickly. That's exactly the kind of thing I want to do. He nodded, pleased. Good, I told them you were special. Now you just have to prove me right. She laughed nervously. No pressure, huh? He smiled. You'll be fine, Tasha. You've got more drive than most people I know. He showed her around the office and introduced her to a few members of the team. Everyone was friendly, though she could tell they were curious about her. The new intern personally recommended by the CEO. But Tasha didn't let that intimidate her. She focused on learning, asking questions, and doing every task with care. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. She helped organize events, responded to community emails, and assisted in writing proposals for local school programs. She worked late some evenings, double-checking every document, making sure everything was perfect. David would sometimes stop by her desk just to check in. How's the workload treating you? He'd ask. It's a lot, she'd admit, but I love it, he'd smile. That's what I like to hear. Over time, they developed a quiet friendship built on mutual respect. He admired her determination. She admired his humility. Despite his position, he treated everyone, from interns to janitors, with kindness. One afternoon, after a long meeting, he found her sitting alone in the break room, sipping coffee and staring out the window. You okay? He asked. She nodded. Yeah, just thinking. About what? She smiled softly. About how weird life is. A few months ago, I was counting coins to pay bus fare. Now I'm sitting here working in this building. Sometimes it doesn't feel real. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You know, life has a funny way of turning when you least expect it. She looked at him. You really think so? I do, he said. You just have to keep your heart open long enough to see it. That line stuck with her long after he left the room. At home, Malik noticed her energy changing. She'd come home tired but happy, humming to herself as she cooked dinner or reviewed notes for class. One night he said, "You're really doing it, huh? Living that grown-up life," she laughed. Something like that. Mom would be proud, he said softly. Tasha froze for a second, the words hitting her deep. She blinked back the sting in her eyes and smiled. Yeah, she whispered. I think so too. Weeks turned into months and her confidence grew. She was soon trusted with bigger responsibilities, leading small projects, managing schedules, and helping plan an annual community fundraiser. It was hard work, but for the first time it didn't feel like survival. It felt like purpose. One evening, as she packed up her things, David stopped by her desk. You got a minute? He asked. Sure. Walk with me. They stepped outside the building. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. He handed her a folder. We're expanding one of our scholarship programs. I'd like you to review this and give me your thoughts. She blinked, surprised. Me, but I'm just an intern. He smiled. You're also someone who knows what it's like to need a chance. That gives you a perspective we can't find in a boardroom. Her heart swelled with gratitude. I'll look it over tonight. I knew you'd say that, he said with a grin. That night, Tasha stayed up late at her kitchen table, reading every page carefully. She made notes, highlighted gaps, and suggested ways to reach more students from low-income neighborhoods. She thought about her own struggles, the bus rides, the skipped meals, the fear of falling behind, and poured all of that into her suggestions. The next morning, she handed the folder back to him. I made a few notes, she said shyly. He flipped through it, eyebrows raised in surprise. A few notes? Tasha, this is excellent. Really? Yes, he said firmly. These ideas are powerful. We're going to use them. Her eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously, he said. You just helped shape a program that'll help hundreds of students. Tasha didn't know what to say. For so long she'd felt invisible, another face in a crowd of people just trying to make it through the day. But in that moment she felt seen, valued, and capable. Later that week, she attended the company's Community Awards event, her first big formal gathering. She wore a simple dress she'd borrowed from a friend and tried her best not to look nervous. When she arrived, the ballroom was full of people, local leaders, teachers, nonprofit organizers. The air buzzed with energy and laughter. David greeted her near the entrance. You clean up well, he teased. She laughed. Don't get used to it. This is borrowed, he chuckled. You belong here, Tasha. Remember that. During the event, David gave a short speech about the importance of compassion in leadership. He spoke about the company's new scholarship program, the one Tasha had helped shape, and how it aimed to remove barriers for students who deserved better. As he talked, he glanced at her briefly, giving a small nod of acknowledgement. She smiled back, her heart full. After the event, a few guests approached her asking about her work. For the first time, she felt like she had something to say, something that mattered. When she got home that night, she sat on her bed and let out a long, shaky breath. She thought about how far she'd come, from scraping together bus fare to standing in a room full of powerful people, her voice being heard. She smiled to herself. You see, Mom, she whispered quietly. I'm getting there. From his office window the next morning, David watched the city wake up. He thought about that rainy morning months ago, the young woman who had stepped forward without hesitation, paying for his fare when she had almost nothing herself. That single moment had reminded him why he started his company's foundation in the first place. Somewhere along the way, he'd gotten lost in numbers and meetings, but she, a stranger with a kind heart, had reminded him of what really mattered. And as he watched her walk into the building that day, smiling and waving to the receptionist, he couldn't help but feel grateful. Because sometimes, he thought, the people who change your life don't even realize they're doing it. And Tasha, without knowing it, had changed his. The months rolled by and Tasha's life started to look completely different from what it had been before. Every day still began early and ended late, But it didn't feel heavy anymore. The weight she used to carry, the endless worry, the fear of falling behind, had slowly turned into motivation. She still worked hard, but now there was a purpose behind it. Her internship at Harris Industries became more than just a job. It felt like a new beginning. She had her own small desk now, a nameplate with Tasha Brown, Community Outreach Intern, printed neatly on it. It wasn't much, but every time she saw it, she felt proud. She was learning more than she ever imagined. She helped design projects for youth centers, visited schools to understand their needs, and sat in on meetings that used to intimidate her. But David never made her feel small. He always treated her like her ideas mattered, like she was part of something bigger. One Friday afternoon, he stopped by her desk and said, "You doing anything this weekend?" Tasha looked up, surprised. Not really. Probably catching up on classwork and laundry." "Why?" he smiled. "We're hosting a community volunteer day tomorrow. The team's heading out to one of the neighborhoods we sponsor. You should come. It'll be good experience. And it's always nice to get out of the office." Tasha grinned. "Count me in." The next morning, she arrived at the community site, an old recreation center that needed repairs. Volunteers in bright shirts were painting walls, planting flowers, and handing out food boxes. Kids ran around laughing, their shoes splashing through puddles from last night's rain. David was there too, wearing jeans and a baseball cap instead of his usual suit. He was helping paint a fence, laughing with a group of teenagers. When he saw Tasha, he waved. "Glad you made it." She smiled. "Wouldn't miss it." He handed her a paintbrush. "Hope you're ready to work." They spent hours side by side painting the worn wooden panels bright blue. Every so often, someone from the neighborhood would stop to thank them, telling stories about how much the center meant to them. At one point, a little girl with braids ran up to Tasha and handed her a drawing. It was a stick figure of two people holding a paintbrush under a rainbow. "That's you," the girl said proudly. Tasha laughed softly, touched. "Thank you, sweetheart. It's beautiful." David looked at the picture and smiled. "You've got a fan." "I guess so," Tasha said, smiling down at the drawing. When the day ended, the fence looked fresh, the playground gleamed, and the walls inside were covered in cheerful colors. As the sun set, David stood on the front steps and looked out at the volunteers packing up. "This," he said quietly to Tasha, "is why I started all this years ago. Seeing people come together like this, it reminds me that business isn't just about profit. It's about people." She nodded. "You're right. And it's nice to be part of something that actually matters." He looked at her for a moment, a gentle pride in his eyes. "You already are." That night, Tasha went home with paint on her hands and a full heart. She sat at the kitchen table with Malik, telling him about the day, the laughter, the kids, the teamwork. "You sound happy," he said, grinning as he ate his dinner. "I am," she said softly. "For the first time in a long time, I really am." A few weeks later, Tasha received an email that made her heart skip. It was from the company's HR department, an invitation to attend the annual Harris Industries Award Gala. It was a formal event, attended by business leaders, community partners, and employees from across the city. She had never been to anything like that. The thought of walking into a ballroom full of important people made her stomach twist, but she also felt excited. David had mentioned the event before. It was the company's biggest night of the year, celebrating projects and people who made a difference. On the night of the gala, she stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the second-hand navy blue dress she had bought from a thrift store. She borrowed a pair of silver earrings from her friend and tied her hair up neatly. For once, she allowed herself to feel beautiful. When she arrived, the ballroom was glowing, chandeliers hanging like stars, tables covered with white cloth, and the sound of soft music in the background. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. David spotted her almost immediately. He walked over with a smile. "You look great, Tasha." "Thank you," she said shyly. "This place is amazing," he nodded. "It's a special night. I'm glad you're here." Throughout the evening, Tasha met people she had only heard about before. Project managers, school directors, nonprofit founders. They talked about community work, and to her surprise, many of them had heard about her. "You're the intern who helped redesign the youth scholarship plan, right?" one woman asked warmly. Tasha hesitated, smiling modestly. "I guess that's me." The woman nodded with approval. "You did great work. That plan's going to help a lot of students. Hearing that filled Tasha with quiet pride. It didn't feel real, to be recognized, to be part of something meaningful. When it was time for speeches, everyone took their seats. David walked up to the stage, his expression calm but sincere. He thanked his staff, partners, and volunteers, then paused before continuing. This year, he said, I want to talk about something simple. Kindness. Sometimes the smallest acts can start the biggest changes. A few months ago, I met someone who reminded me of that. She didn't know who I was. She didn't expect anything in return. She just helped because it was the right thing to do. Tasha froze. Her breath caught in her throat. David smiled gently, his eyes scanning the room. That small moment reminded me why I started this company's foundation. Because compassion, real compassion, changes lives. And tonight I want to recognize someone who embodies that spirit. He turned toward her. Tasha Brown, would you please stand? The room turned toward her, clapping softly. Tasha's heart pounded as she stood up, cheeks flushed. David continued. Tasha showed me that kindness doesn't come from wealth or status. It comes from heart. She believed in helping others even when she had little herself. And because of that, she's become an example of what our company stands for. People clapped louder this time, and Tasha blinked back tears. She hadn't expected this. David smiled at her warmly. Thank you, Tasha, for reminding us that humanity still matters. When the applause faded, she sat down, still trembling a little. The woman beside her leaned over and whispered, You must be proud. Tasha smiled faintly, her eyes glistening, more than proud. After the event ended, David found her near the exit. You okay? He asked gently. She laughed nervously. I can't believe you did that. You didn't have to. I wanted to, he said. You deserved it. She looked at him, still overwhelmed. I just did what anyone would do. He shook his head. No, not anyone. That's what makes you special. They stood there in quiet understanding for a moment before he said, There's something else I want to discuss with you soon. A new project. I think you'd be perfect for it, her eyes widened. Really? Yes, he said with a smile. But we'll talk Monday. For now, go celebrate. You've earned it. Tasha left the building that night under a sky full of stars. The city lights shimmered below, and the cool air carried a feeling she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The next week, David called her into his office. On his desk was a folder labeled Second Chance Initiative. He looked at her and said, I've been thinking about creating a new program, something that provides transportation and education support for low-income students. I'd like you to help me lead it, Tasha blinked, stunned. You mean, me lead it? He nodded. You know the struggle better than anyone. You can help shape it into something real. She sat there for a moment, trying to process it. I don't even know what to say. Say yes, he said with a kind smile. She laughed softly. Yes, 100 times yes. Over the next several months, Tasha poured her heart into the new project. She helped design the structure, connected with schools, and organized community events. She named it Second Fair Program, inspired by the morning that started it all. When the program launched, dozens of students received their first set of transportation vouchers and scholarships. The smiles on their faces brought tears to Tasha's eyes. One girl hugged her tightly and said, Now I can get to school every day. Thank you. Tasha smiled through her tears. Just promise me you'll do your best, okay? I will, the girl said proudly. Standing there surrounded by kids and families, Tasha felt like everything had come full circle. She looked across the crowd and saw David watching from a distance, smiling proudly. Their eyes met, and in that moment, they both knew. One small act of kindness on a rainy morning had grown into something far bigger than either of them had imagined. Sometimes, it really did take just one moment to change everything. 2 years later, the sound of laughter filled the air outside a new brick building on the east side of Atlanta. Bright banners hung across the entrance, each one carrying the same message. Second Fair Foundation, opening day. The crowd that had gathered was a mix of students, parents, teachers, and community members. Balloons bobbed gently in the morning breeze, and children ran around holding cups of lemonade. For many of them, this building wasn't just another center. It was a place of hope, and right in the middle of it all stood Tasha. She looked different now, more confident, more sure of herself. Her clothes were simple but neat, and she carried herself with quiet grace. Her eyes still had that warmth that had made her stand out on that rainy bus years ago. But there was something new in them too, a spark of leadership. David stood beside her, smiling as he watched the people explore the new facility. "You did it," he said quietly. Tasha shook her head with a small laugh. "We did it," he chuckled. "Maybe. But you're the one who turned an idea into this." She smiled, watching a group of teenagers gathering near the door, laughing and taking photos. "It doesn't even feel real sometimes," she said softly. "I used to worry about whether I could afford a bus ride. Now we're helping kids who were just like me." David nodded, his voice gentle. "And that's why you were perfect for this. You understand what it means to struggle, but more importantly, you understand what it means to care." Inside the building, volunteers handed out welcome packets while local reporters set up cameras. The walls were decorated with colorful murals painted by students from nearby schools. Images of buses, open books, and hands reaching out to help others. On one of the walls, in bold blue letters, were the words, "One small act can change everything." Tasha stopped in front of it, reading it slowly. Those were the exact words she had written when they were designing the center's interior. It still amazed her how everything had begun from that one small moment, a $2 bus fare that had changed her entire life. She took a deep breath and turned toward the small stage set up near the front. A microphone waited for her there. As she walked toward it, her heart began to race. She had spoken at events before, but this one felt different. This one was hers. When she reached the stage, the crowd quieted. She looked around at the faces, some familiar, some not, but all of them filled with hope and curiosity. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice a little shaky at first. "Thank you all for coming. When I look at this building, I don't just see walls and rooms. I see stories. I see dreams. I see second chances." She paused, glancing at David, who gave her an encouraging nod. "A few years ago," she continued, "I was just a girl trying to make it through college. I didn't have much, barely enough to cover rent, books, and food. Every day felt like a race I couldn't win. But one morning on a crowded bus, I did something that changed my life forever. I helped a stranger pay his fare. I didn't know who he was, and I didn't think much of it. But that small act started something I never expected." The audience listened closely, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. "That man turned out to be someone who believed in giving people chances," she said, smiling gently. "He showed me that kindness can come full circle in ways we don't see at first. Because of that moment, I got an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to help others." She took another breath, her tone turning heartfelt. "This foundation was built on that lesson. We're here to make sure no student has to choose between getting to school and staying home. We're here to remind people that help doesn't always come from big things, it starts with small ones. A smile, a kind word, a helping hand. Sometimes that's all it takes to change a life." Applause filled the room, gentle but growing louder as her words sank in. Some of the parents wiped their eyes. The students clapped and cheered. Tasha smiled, her eyes glistening. "And to anyone out there who feels like life is too heavy, or that nobody sees your struggle, I want you to know something. Your story isn't over. Sometimes the universe sends you a blessing when you least expect it. Sometimes it starts with just one bus fare." The crowd rose to their feet, clapping louder now. Cameras flashed and reporters captured the moment. When the applause faded, David joined her on stage. He placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You did amazing." She smiled up at him. "I had a good teacher." They stood together as the ribbon was cut, marking the official opening of the foundation. Kids ran inside, exploring the classrooms and computer labs. Some sat in the reading corner, flipping through donated books. Others gathered near the walls, tracing the painted murals with their fingers. Later that afternoon, after most people had gone, Tasha and David walked through the building together. The sun poured through the tall windows, filling the hallways with golden light. "It's beautiful," David said softly. "Better than I ever imagined," Tasha nodded. "You know what's funny? When I was little, my mom used to tell me that every act of kindness plants a seed. I never really understood it until now. This building, all of this, it's like seeing that seed grow." David smiled. "Your mom was right." They stopped in front of a framed photograph hanging near the entrance. It was a picture of a city bus. Below it, a small plaque read, "In memory of the day that started everything." Tasha stared at it for a moment, smiling through tears. "That day changed my whole world," she whispered. David nodded. "And now you're changing other people's worlds." That's how it's supposed to work. As they stepped outside, the evening sky was painted in shades of pink and gold. The air was warm and calm, carrying the sounds of laughter and chatter from inside the center. A young girl approached them, holding a small notebook. "Miss Tasha," she said shyly, "can you sign this for me?" Tasha looked surprised. "Me?" The girl nodded eagerly. "You're my hero. I want to be like you one day." Tasha's heart melted. She knelt down, took the notebook, and signed her name carefully. "You'll be even better," she said with a smile. The girl grinned and ran off, waving the notebook proudly. David watched the exchange quietly, his eyes full of pride. "You know," he said softly, "when I think about that morning on the bus, I still can't believe how everything turned out. I just needed a ride. I didn't know I was about to meet someone who would remind me what life's really about." Tasha smiled gently. "And I didn't know I was about to meet someone who'd give me a chance to live my purpose." For a moment, they both stood in silence, watching the kids play in the courtyard. "Funny thing," David said, looking up at the sky. "You never know when your life's about to change." Tasha nodded. "That's why it's so important to be kind. You never know who's watching or how far that kindness can go." As the sun dipped lower, she looked back at the building one last time. The lights inside glowed softly, and she could hear music and laughter spilling through the open doors. It felt like home. She smiled and whispered almost to herself, "This is just the beginning." The wind carried her words into the evening, soft and sure. Somewhere out there, another person might be stepping onto a bus, ready to offer a small act of kindness that could one day change everything, just like hers had.